So the Gribbles.
Right. I mean, Dale Gribble is described as being Hank's best friend in the show, which is quite weird considering that he is a quite sort of unpleasant, mischievous character. But looking at like the other friends that he had, it's like Bill Dauterive and Boomhauer, they're quite strange in their own ways, right? So I think his design is based off of Hunter S. Thompson, and he is voiced to sound like William S. Burroughs. So there's quite a few influences there. It was, of course, Greg Daniels' idea to have this guy be kind of a caricature of like this more of the right wing conspiracy, not where he's being kind of sort of cuckolded by this Native American guy who's John Redcorn, who's pictured here. But of course, that was of course like Greg Daniels' idea, but still, like, in spite of like how sort of pathetic this character is, I still have sort of a fondness for him. He creates a lot of comedic leverage, and there are, even though he's slightly exaggerated, there are a lot of Americans who are like that. But as you mentioned, Jay Bjorn, this guy's an in 2022, this guy's is an insurrectionist, right? He's a domestic terrorist like the American Taliban. But in 1997, this was more of like a funny character, or even say like post 9/11, you'd have these a lot of these 9/11 truthers, and I think it was a quite large portion of the American public who believed in some 9/11 conspiracy, but it was not taken seriously in the way that it is now. So,
well, and it speaks to, in many ways, the kind of like a lot of the progenitors of kind of like the online American right are in some way kind of related to like figures like Dale Gribble. So in the 80s and 90s, there was kind of this rise of what was called like the quote unquote militia movement, and this was, kind of like a very like disparate group of like, kind of like constitutionalists, like more like Wignat types. But this is the kind of events that led to things like Ruby Ridge and Waco, obviously Waco, which happened near Austin, Texas. Yeah. And so there was kind of this whole conservative subculture of characters like Dale Gribble, and that was to a certain degree related to figures like Pat Buchanan and, Rush Limbaugh, who is kind of like the premier like American conservative talk radio host. And so like as someone who grew up in a like conservative red America, the figures like Dale Gribble, and specifically like also like the gun club where they go to take Bobby shooting, that Dale Gribble's a member of, those are very real places, and less so now as kind of, like time has continued to march on.
You mean like the homemade thing he's got going on?
No, specifically, I can't remember, but there's the episode, and it's been a while since I've seen it, where, it's discovered that Bobby is a crack shot, and they go to like the Rod Club.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Never mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Those places are very real, and they all look almost identical to that. They're all made out of like horrible plywood and have like pinup calendars from '87 on the wall. Right. But my point is, like, this is an archetype, and it's obviously played up for laughs. But I mean, there are, half a dozen people like this that I, am friends with, that I know. And a lot of it is in like a certain way is obviously related to, people we would view more positively.
Real quick here, Glow in the Dark for $5 says, one of the best episodes of King of the Hill is when Bobby ate a 72-ounce steak while looking a vegan in the eye out of spite.
Yeah, that was a great episode. Like I said, Bobby has a lot of unconventional talents that they do get to display, even though it doesn't lead to any bonding between him and Hank. But so with like this Dale Gribble character, what is interesting is like the amount of conspiracies that people like him can seemingly stack on top of each other. I was listening to Jay Bjorn, your interview with the last one you had with Prudentialist, and you talked about like how you love the American boomer con basically, and they had, they live in their own sort of ecosystem where they just believe in every conspiracy they can find, and they find some way where that they can sort of make them work.
They all connect together into one mega conspiracy. Yeah.
Connect, where it's like like you said, Barack Obama and Saddam Hussein are related somehow, and they're from Mars, and
that's
moon landing was faked and so on.
Dale Gribble is a character that I like, not because I want to be Dale Gribble or I like think he's a particularly admirable person, but just because like figures like him are kind of like harmless and amusing. And a lot of this comes from, especially with like the boomer conspiracy stuff, like people whose heart is kind of genuinely in the right place. You know, they feel their like way of life slipping. They see that the country that they grew up in is changing, and they've never really again adapted. So they still like have this kind of like credulous nature that leads them to kind of like insane conspiracy theories. And I don't know, as much as I like recognize that they're incorrect, I can never really bring myself to hate those people.
Yes,
because the core is something sincere, right? They feel that something has gone wrong somewhere along the way, right? And then they sort of try desperately to figure out what it is. But I think they get limited by their situation and their generation and their worldview, right?
but of course, with Dale Gribble in this show, he's not presented in a way where he's like just trying to hold on to the old ways. He's a bit more of like an open character. If you look at this sort of 5-factor model, where he's very interested in learning about specific topics, and like that's how he spends most of his time, right? Just reading weird books, magazines, listening to police radio in his basement, and just to make a living, he has like this bug removal business. That's like the Dale's Dead Bug thing, which is the thing that I wanted to ask you about, J. Bjorn, is this seems to be like a very kind of prevalent model of business, or something that recurs in the United States, where people can put up these single proprietorships for bug removal businesses. And
yeah,
of course,
that's
you have
definitely
bug
accurate.
removal in Norway, but it's usually by like larger companies, and it's a lot more formalized. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that, if that's something you know about.
So we definitely have bigger companies that do that as well. Like there are any number of firms that do it, but a big part of it is that so much of America is so, I guess, like wet and humid. You know that there are places where, you know, like rot and weatherproofing is essentially like it is a almost like yearly part of your life. You know, like specifically like there are areas which if you don't have someone coming to exterminate bugs, essentially you could lose your house to termites in a matter of years. So that's another part of it, that the demand is just huge. But also one of the like truly positive things about America, it's kind of like undersold, is that there are a lot of, and these are going away, by the way, especially like post Obama and post COVID, that there are a lot of, I guess, kind of careers that are open to kind of like sole proprietors. So for instance, right, like a lot of kind of like home maintenance and kind of like contracting, it's very still relatively easy to, as a single guy, kind of start your own business. And so that also applies to things like, waste disposal or like exterminators, people like that. So that is very real. And there are a lot of, I guess, people who essentially like ride that kind of like into the kulak class. So a girl I went to high school with, her family was very wealthy, and they were wealthy because her father essentially started a plumbing business himself and turned that into kind of like a local plumbing empire, and that is still albeit less and less, that is still a path towards material prosperity. And even if it doesn't make you rich, like there are a lot of like people who have businesses like that, who essentially like support themselves kind of outside the system.
Yeah, no, I actually think that's a great thing about the United States. It's very difficult to do that in Norway. I think because of a lot of the red tape and the regulations. You get
I had
punished.
some issue with that a couple of years ago when I had to remove some. I tried to remove some wasps from my house, which aren't a protective species, but I wasn't sure if it was wasps or bees. I couldn't get close enough to see, so I had to like start this entire insurance apparatus just to get someone from like some random exterminator company to come to my property and basically be like, "Yep, that's wasps. You can remove them safely." So there was a lot of red tape just to remove some bugs.
Whereas in the US, if you can't yourself buy the cancer-causing Monsanto product to essentially like to demolish it from 50 feet away, you can definitely have some good old boy in a trucker hat there in 45 minutes to douse your lawn in
Exactly right.
And to be fair, this is actually like a more serious note, but a lot of people have given themselves, and maybe some of that, like the protections you're talking about are good, because a lot of people have given themselves like very serious like lifelong genetic damage from pesticides. And in rural communities, it's very common on kind of like local television to see ads, essentially for like class action lawsuits saying like, oh, were you exposed to XYZ chemicals? Because so many of these chemicals were essentially handed out to anyone who wanted them, and they ended
There
up.
is a middle ground, right, between too much red tape and no red tape at all. I think a lot of the dissident right would agree. We're not libertarians.
No, definitely.
Glow in the Dark for another $5 says Mr. Gribble was right about trans women. Only natural women would get their money's worth at gynecologists, and even his conspiracy theories came true. Well, that's one of those funny things, in that a lot of the things that comes out of Gribble's mouth terms to be end up being quite prophetic in a weird sense.
Yes, I think that's true. Like for many conspiracy theorists, although, like we mentioned previously, this is kind of he tends to believe like almost every conspiracy that he can find. Where for this character, it almost seems to be a bit more of like a brand of hobby, just to find as many conspiracies as he can, and read up on them, and sit and read about UFOs and reptiles and so on. But continuing a little bit more about the Gribble situation and the Gribble's family, it's sort of a running joke in this show that he is married to like a quite attractive news anchor. That's Nancy Gribble, that's pictured there, and she has like for 12 years had like a continuing affair with this kind of Chad Native American John Redcorn, and Nancy has a son like with John Redcorn there. That's I think Joseph is his name, right? And they keep just sort of playing this comedy, this sort of comedic bit over and over again, where like Dale is super suspicious about everything that everybody else does, but he can't just kind of see the conspiracy that's going on underneath this.
And also everyone in the
nose.
neighborhood is aware that that she's cheating on him. Right?
Yes,
everyone but Dale
everybody
knows.
And
There's this
and
very
Dale
early
and Peggy,
episode
actually.
where there's this very early episode where I think Bobby is talking to Joseph. They're hanging out, and they're saying something. He's like, "Yeah, I think that's in Dale Gribble's truck," says Bobby, and then Joseph goes like, "Oh, you mean my dad?" Oh yeah, says Bobby. Your dad.
Well, and that's also something that I think is kind of funny, because in one of the earlier episodes, and this is another like anti-bureaucratic sentiment, the episode where a kind of like wet behind the ears social worker thinks that Hank Hill beats Bobby, and the idea that in kind of like these small like rural southern towns, that these kind of rumors spread like wildfire, but nothing will ever be directly addressed. So everyone knows about Dale Gribble and his wife. Everyone knows, the instant the rumor goes out that Hank Hill beats his kids, but no one ever talks to Hank Hill about it. It's all just kind of these like old women, like making faces at him. And so that is very true to life.
Glow in the Dark for another $5. Dale, at the end of the day, would happily sacrifice himself for others, like when he sacrificed himself to fire ants to save Bobby. Yeah, but to be fair, he put the fire ants on Hank's lawn. So.
Yes, I mean, because Dale is different from the other characters in the fact that he, in spite of being quite pathetic and unathletic, he has big thoughts, like he wants to be a super spy, and he thinks about like, government agencies and geopolitics, and, he wants to kind of be an assassin and a superhero and so on, and like, sacrificing himself in some kind of heroic endeavor. It's for him a kind of a great end in a sense, even though he doesn't really have what it takes to be an actual hero. But like with the Dale and the Nancy Gribble situation, I've looked a little bit at these sort of fan communities on surrounding King of the Hill, and I didn't realize that like Nancy is actually considered one of the most kind of hated characters because of the continued affair with John Redcorn. But I think like maybe that's kind of an unpopular take, but in this situation, it's almost like property law. If like somebody walks into your house and like they'll start sleeping in your bed and you don't say anything, and they've been sleeping in your bed for like 12 years and
How
you still don't
long
say
can you
anything.
have
Like,
sex with your wife before you
you know,
have basically just lost?
well, like, okay, now they live in your house, right? If you after 12 years and they've slept in your bed, then you go to the courts to complain about it. They basically they would just ignore it because you've sort of like permitted that to happen to the
Yeah,
point
that's
where
like
it's become like the
water.
new stable arrangement. Yes.
Oh, I was just saying. I mean, essentially, he has squatters' rights to to his wife.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of almost how I think about it. When if it's been going on for 12 years, then he has the squatters' rights, as you said. But it's interesting because like John Redcorn has a lot of arcs in this show as well that relates to more of like Native American culture in the United States. That's kind of an interesting chapter onto itself, and it's something that I was almost a little bit hesitant to discuss my thoughts on because, like you said, the dissident right is a sort of surprisingly diverse community, right? I think we probably have like a higher amount of like non-whites and trans people than you'd see in a regular like boardroom or sort of a white collar workplace that is progressive.
Tifa meeting.
But I don't know how many like Native American dissident writers that exists, to be honest. So,
That's
but
also so the one person I know, and he's not directly dissident right. He's kind of a more like conspiracy libertarian. But I know Ryan Dawson is Native American, and but that's such a specific like insular community. I don't know anything about it. So even though I'm American, I can't really offer anything on that.
well, you see, I've been to Oklahoma, right? And they have a lot of like Native American communities there, where like one thing that is pretty big in the United States is being able to prove that you have some ancestor that was Native American because it entitles you to a lot of government gifts. And that's been like the joke with Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren, where she's like Pocahontas because she jotted down that she was Native American to get into college, right? So like in Oklahoma, they have like it's just this insane thing where you'll meet someone who's just like white as mayonnaise, and they'll describe themselves as like I'm Cherokee or I'm Hopi Indian or something, and they have like 1/64th Native American ancestry. It's like this absolutely absurd type of thing. And in the first place, I do not know why they would even want to identify themselves with this community, either for just some kind of sentimental aesthetic reason. Because like John Redcorn, I feel like he represents a lot of these Native Americans in the fact that he's a completely kind of pitiful, pathetic character. Dale is able to help him out, like later in the show, get reparations for some stuff, and where he's able to kind of like buy his own casino, and that goes to shit because that's a thing in the United States as well, where if you're Native American, you're actually allowed to run casinos, which other groups are not able to. There's other things that you can do, like say grow peyote as well. I think you can grow these cacti in your garden that are psychedelic. There's certain drugs that you can grow because it's considered a part of the Native American culture and so on.
Heritage.
So it's pretty hot to just have to say that to look white, to be sort of white passing and have to get the Gibbs at the same time. But I mean, the arc for this character is really that he tries to get in touch with his son. It doesn't work because he can't really commit. I mean, he runs this sort of like massage business out of a trailer home where he spins plates and he sleeps with a lot of women. Aside from Nancy Gribble, I mean, like given his physiognomy, that's pretty easy for him. But he is an absolutely kind of like a sad character who gets a lot of stuff, gets all these gibs thrown at him, but nothing seems to ever make things better. And that's kind of how this community is, even though like they're not a part of the conversation in any point. We talk about like the black community and the Mexicans and stuff, but yeah, these people exist and they get all these gibs. But I would like we said with the black community, I would not want to be them in like any way possible. So
Yeah. Glow in the Dark for $10 says if this show was based, it would have had a character say to Redcorn that his people were not the angels people portray them as, and they did worse things than the U.S. government ever did. Tribes are tax-free. There's a lot of chatter
they do
about
have
the show not being based, and I would ultimately agree with King of the Hill as a general show. isn't based because it's made by a Gen Xer who sort of like time capsuled a different, better time. But at the same time, this is a people that still exist. Like the people the show portrays still exist, and they're someone that's gonna have to be, accounted for when we win. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I mean, regarding Glow in the Dark's comment, there is an episode where John Redcorn goes more on this kind of guilt trip thing, where he starts talking, goes to the school where Bobby and Joseph attend and starts talking about, everything that was done to their people and like what the white man did to me and so on. And he tries to kind of drive a wedge between children and parents with this this kind of like white guilt complex stuff. So it ends up with like Bobby Hill wanting to do like a presentation and a kind of celebration of John Redcorn's culture, which, I mean, because he is a kid and he doesn't understand political correctness, he does research on John Redcorn's tribe, which is basically that they were cannibals. And he just has like this this big presentation about how they were, cannibalistic, and he's sort of prepared like an honor meal that's like this kind of synthetic human head that he starts serving to people. And I mean, like Bobby has a lot of those kind of like accidentally based moments where he will either try to make fun of Native American tribes, or where he accidentally like steals Stormfront jokes and performs them at like this ethnic stand-up club and so on. So I mean, yeah, there are some kind of like slightly based episodes. I mean, we have to live in reality here. Like, I mean, you're not going to get a show that's like this, that's considered one of like the best and biggest, longest running sitcoms, and people are going to
it's not like Julius Evola is going to feature on Family Guy, and he's going to
the characters are not going to like goose step around reading Evola and that kind of stuff. Sorry, it's not going to happen. Like this is this is as good as you're going to get given the situation that we are in.